Grandpa. Tell me about the good old days. Sometimes it feels like this world's gone crazy.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Christianity and Me, entitled Christian Nostalgia for a Biblical World. Did you know that gift cards were the most unused gifts given during the holiday season? I didn't know that. I heard that on a Christian radio station during a promotional campaign ran by a foundation asking for unused gift cards as donations in order to help the poor. The same station has programs which offer Alaska cruises for thousands of dollars. Where I'm from, there's a nostalgia for a past golden age where Christianity was the rule of the land and all was well with the world. Perhaps it only happens with conservatives, I'm not sure. But I read an interesting quote recently, namely that conservatives worship the radicals of yesterday, or something to that extent. And I see this a lot because not only did I grow up around these people, but I worship among them and I go to school with them. So perhaps I see this more than I should. In my view, the problem with this mindset is that there has never been a perfect society. We have always had problems as a society. By nature, we're violent, we're greedy, we're selfish, and we're driven by an urge to survive and reproduce, no matter what the cost. And when you contrast modern society with the first century world, I think we can see the extent of our progress. Now, we'll just use the Bible so as to not have any stumbling blocks like history or sociological analysis present. But by any standard that you measure history, people in antiquity were a lot worse off. A whole lot worse off than we are today. There was slavery, there were wars, there was rampant poverty, life was cheap, people were very expendable, and we essentially lived in jungle law societies where might made right. Now, by comparison, our modern world is a haven. And in my eyes, we've made a lot of progress. The question that needs to be asked is, what is this progress due to? Is it due to religion? Or is it due to science and secular values? A lot of people like to point to this progress being catalyzed by Christian values, and them being as the driving forces for justice. Some point to slavery in England being abolished due to William Wilberforce, who is a Christian, or to Martin Luther King for leading the civil rights movement. I would like to note that first, Wilberforce just happened to be a Christian in my view. If Christianity was at the root of the drive to abolish slavery, and was the reason why it was abolished in England, then England, being a Christian nation, would have immediately accepted this argument from Wilberforce when he first made it. But history doesn't tell us that. History tells us that Wilberforce had to fight this battle over multiple years. A more cynical view of how this worked out is to say that perhaps the slave trade was no longer profitable in England, and we found Jesus' excuse was more of a cover story. Now, in the United States, we got lucky in a sense because the North won. And I don't want to get into a debate that if the South had won, slavery would have been abolished over time anyways. Because a lot of the rich landowners actually went to South America and they didn't really miss a beat. The thing is that if the South had won, they would have had a biblical claim for their victory, because they had a biblical basis in defending slavery. And while perhaps some of the characteristics of Southern slavery were maybe different from those in antiquity, slavery was slavery. It wasn't just a employer-employee relationship. These people didn't have their lives in their own hands. They could be killed at will. Same as in the Old Testament, in the Old and New Testament. Now, Martin Luther King's convictions were based on the Bible, just like many of his opponents. So I think we should be really cautious when we attribute this drive for human rights and progress to Christian values. And let's turn to science for a minute. When religious dogma ruled the land, things like anatomical dissections were condemned. Students in Italy were jailed, tortured, and murdered during the Inquisition for trying to learn about the human body in order to heal people. We see how Galileo got in trouble for his ideas about the sun. This was an era of conflict between church, dogma, and scientific facts, and it was a bloody battle, usually with the blood of innocents being spilled. This battle raged on for a long time. The unification of Italy led to the downfall of the Papal States and relegated the Pope, unwillingly it must be said, to the spiritual realm. And this battle is not over, and this tension has continued to exist up until today. Now, with this in mind, let's move on to abortion. Some may ask, why doesn't the church raise such a fuss when the death penalty is involved as opposed to abortion or poverty? We all know about the United States, and we think that this issue is disproportional in this nation. But it's really not. In countries like Portugal, Mexico, Colombia, where the abortion measures were on the ballot or considered by legislatures, bishops came out and cardinals came out and made public statements. When Pelosi made a statement about it, she was chastised by a cardinal, I believe. To me, while I don't necessarily think that the Christian response to these issues is a unbiblical one, I have to ask about the discrepancy. Why is there such a strong reaction on this issue as opposed to issues related to poverty or the death penalty or war or, I mean, you could go down the line. Could it be that the issue of the death penalty and poverty don't offer as many tangible benefits to the church hierarchy and bureaucracy as abortion does? Abortion mobilizes voters who decide elections and give access to the power that makes a direct difference in the lives of all. Secular power. Same with the anti-gay measures. They were prominent in 2004 in Ohio when it had their same-sex marriage amendment, as well as in 2008 with Proposition 8 in California. And I have to ask, why is the church being selective about spending its capital? In my opinion, it is because it has chosen to compromise part of its beliefs in order to gain secular power so that they can return to the days when it ruled the land. What should the church ideally do? My simple proposition is that the church should stay out of the public sphere and do what it was commissioned to do, namely to preach the gospel, to tend to its flock, to serve the poor, to help the widow and the orphan. Now, a wise man once said that a union of government and religion tends to destroy government and degrade religion. So I often ask myself, if Jesus came back for one day, let's say this Sunday, what would he do? Would he go to church? Would he volunteer for a political campaign? Would he work in a soup kitchen? Would he visit the homeless? I think the answer is simple. I think Jesus would go to the people in need of love and would love them. He would love the naked by clothing them. He would love the hungry by feeding them. He would show God's love to those most in need of God's love. I doubt he'd be heading to Alaska on a Bible cruise while there were hungry people on the streets. But maybe I'm wrong.